Humans weren't just crazy. They were fucking insane. That's the only explanation for why Gabriel Hicks thought he could win a dogfight against an entire Malon fighter squadron in his crippled ship. Hellfire shuddered as another blast slammed into its hull, alarms blaring. Shields gone, weapons nearly depleted. One more hit, and he'd be space dust. "Nowhere left to run, human," Commander Weason growled over comms. "Your species' insanity ends here." Gabriel's hands flew over the controls. The bastard was right, he couldn't outgun them, but he could out-crazy them. "Fuck you, Weason," Gabriel spat back. "I'm just getting started." He whipped Hellfire around and gunned the engines, charging headlong into a nearby asteroid field. The Malon fighters swarmed after him, cannons blazing. Gabriel jinked and juked, weaving between tumbling rocks, the Malon struggling to keep up, several rammed asteroids vanishing in flames. He burst from the field, Weason and two others still doggedly on his tail. A tan planet loomed ahead, covered in dense jungle. Gritting his teeth, Gabriel angled Hellfire into a steep dive, plunging into the atmosphere. Superheated plasma roared around the ship as it shook like it would rip apart. The Malon kept coming, determined to vaporize him. At the last second, Gabriel yanked back on the stick, leveling out. The pursuing fighters, built for space not atmospheric flight, couldn't pull up in time. They slammed into the surface, exploding in spectacular fireballs. Gabriel didn't have time to celebrate. Hellfire came apart around him, control panels sparking and smoke filling the cabin. He rode the ship down, bracing for impact. Everything went black as he hit, his restraints snapping tight. When Gabriel came to, he was still strapped in his chair, but the chair was sitting in the dirt, Hellfire reduced to flaming wreckage scattered through the jungle. "Any landing you can walk away from," he muttered, unlatching his harness and standing unsteadily. He had to move before the surviving Malon located the crash site. But as he took stock of his injuries and the alien landscape, the ugly truth sank in. He was stranded alone deep in hostile territory. Weason, or one of the other Malon, had surely reported his position. He had no comms, no ship, and no backup. His allies had no idea where he was. By the time they responded to his missed check-in, he'd be long dead, just another casualty in the war. Unless he still had his wits, his training, and his iron will to survive. If he could stay one step ahead of the Malon, he might find a way to strike back and turn the tables. First things first, though. He had to scavenge what he could from Hellfire and find shelter. Once he had a base of operations, he could plan his next move. Because one way or another he was getting off this planet, even if he had to steal a Malon ship to do it, and if he happened to make the alien bastards bleed in the process, so much the better. He was a human, after all, defiant to the end and crazier than a shithouse rat. It was time to show the Malon what that really meant. Gabriel clenched his jaw as he surveyed the dense alien jungle around him, the scorched wreckage of Hellfire still smoldering nearby. He knew he had to keep moving, put distance between himself and the crash site before the Malon zeroed in on his location. He salvaged what he could from the ruined ship, a few ration packs, a canteen, a combat knife, and his trusty sidearm. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He holstered the gun and set off into the undergrowth, hacking through the foliage with his blade. As he trekked deeper into the jungle, a glint of metal caught his eye through the trees. He froze, muscles tensing. Slowly, carefully, he crept closer, keeping to the shadows. There, nestled in a clearing, stood a small Malon outpost. A couple of guards lazed about the entrance, pulse rifles hanging loosely at their sides. Gabriel's heart raced. This was his chance to even the odds. He circled around, scoping out the perimeter, until he spotted a gap in their defenses, a ventilation duct half hidden by a tangle of vines. Perfect. Quiet as a ghost, he slunk up to the duct and pried open the grate with his knife. He wriggled inside the tight confines, forcing him to crawl on his stomach through the narrow shaft. The duct dumped him out in a dimly lit storage room. He scanned the shelves, grinning fiercely as he spied a rack of Malon weapons and tactical gear. He grabbed a pulse rifle and a bandolier of grenades, slinging them over his shoulders. Footsteps thudded in the corridor outside. Gabriel pressed himself flat against the wall just as the door slid open and a Malon soldier stepped inside. In a blur of motion, Gabriel lunged, clamping a hand over the alien's mouth and jamming his knife up under its chin. He lowered the body to the floor, then slipped out into the hallway, rifle at the ready. Finally, he found it. A command center manned by a single officer. Gabriel burst in, rifle leveled at the alien's head, before it could even react. "Don't fucking move," he growled. "I want access to your systems now." The Malon complied, trembling fingers flying over the console. Gabriel scanned the schematics and files that popped up on the screen, his blood running cold. The Malon had a secret weapons facility on the planet, one that was developing a bioweapon engineered to target human DNA. If they finished and deployed it, it would mean the end of the war, and humanity along with it. Gabriel copied the coordinates and data onto a portable drive. He had to get this intel back to his people, but first he had to destroy that facility. Just then alarms started blaring. The console lit up with warnings of incoming ships. Weizen had tracked him down. A plasma bolt seared across his arm, drawing a hiss of pain from Gabriel's lips. He lobbed a grenade, using the explosion as cover to race for the tree line. Just before he plunged into the jungle, he caught a glimpse of Weizen, the alien commander's eyes searing with rage and hatred as they bored into Gabriel's own. Then he was gone, vanishing into the foliage as plasma fire stitched through the leaves behind him. But he couldn't stop. Not now, with the coordinates to the weapons facility burning a hole in his pocket and the fate of his species hanging in the balance. He had to reach that facility and destroy it no matter the cost, no matter what the planet or Weizen threw at him. Failure was not an option. Because if that bioweapon was completed, it wouldn't just mean the end of him. It would mean the end of every man, woman and child back on Earth and across human space. Gabriel's lungs burned as he raced through the alien jungle, hacking through the dense undergrowth with his combat knife. Weizen's forces were hot on his heels, the sound of their pursuit growing louder with each passing second. Up ahead, the terrain grew rockier, the trees thinning out to reveal a towering cliff face. Gabriel's eyes desperately scanned the rock, searching for any hint of shelter. There. A dark fissure, half hidden by a tangle of vines. He dove for the opening, squeezing his body through the narrow gap, just as plasma fire scorched the stone where he'd been standing a heartbeat before. The cave swallowed him, the sounds of the jungle fading away as he plunged deeper into the darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading him through a labyrinth of chambers and passageways. Strange, luminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie glow, but it was the carvings that made Gabriel stop in his tracks. Intricate murals covered every surface, depicting scenes of ancient Malon warriors, wielding technology far beyond anything the Malon had today. Energy weapons, force fields, even what looked like powered armor. What the hell was this place? Gabriel traced his fingers over a particular carving, a circular chamber housing a pulsing orb. Without warning, the wall shuddered and slid aside, revealing the very chamber from the mural. In the center of the room, hovering above a pedestal, was the orb. It glowed with an inner light, tendrils of energy snaking out to brush against Gabriel's skin as he approached. The moment he touched it, a jolt of power surged through his body, nearly bringing him to his knees. The orb pulsed faster, brighter as if responding to his presence. Gabriel could feel it, an ancient intelligence, probing at the edges of his mind. Images flashed through his thoughts, the tomb's creators, the fall of their civilization, the orb waiting centuries for someone worthy to wield its power. A wordless whisper echoed in his skull. An offer, knowledge, strength, the power to destroy his enemies. All he had to do was accept it. Gabriel's fingers closed around the orb just as a plasma bolt sizzled past his ear. Weizen stood at the chamber's entrance, a squad of Malon soldiers at his back. The alien commander's eyes widened as he saw the artifact in Gabriel's hand. You have no idea what you're dealing with, human, Wezen snarled. Hand over the orb and I might let you live. Gabriel laughed, a rough, harsh sound. Not fucking likely. He thrust out his hand, the orb flaring with blinding light. A wave of force slammed into the Malon, hurling them back like ragdolls. Gabriel leaped after them, his body moving with supernatural speed and strength. He tore through the soldiers like a whirlwind, the orb's energy crackling around him in a storm of light and fury. Plasma bolts ricocheted harmlessly off the shimmering barrier that now surrounded him. With each blow, each Malon that fell before him, Gabriel could feel the artifact's power growing, merging with his own. Wezen roared with rage, lunging at Gabriel with his plasma blade drawn. Their weapons clashed in a blaze of sparks, the force of their collision shaking the cave around them. They traded blows in a deadly dance. Wezen's skill and experience matched against Gabriel's augmented strength and speed. The Malon commander scored a glancing hit, his blade searing across Gabriel's chest, but the human barely felt it through the orb's protective field. Gabriel retaliated with a devastating uppercut that sent Wezen flying. The commander crashed into the far wall, cracking the stone. As he struggled to rise, a stray energy blast from the orb struck the ceiling above him. The cavern rumbled ominously. Rocks began to fall, then larger boulders, then entire sections of the roof. In seconds, a wall of rubble separated Gabriel from Wezen and the few remaining Malon soldiers. Gabriel stared at the collapsed tunnel, chest heaving. He was alone now, cut off from both his allies and his enemies. But he wasn't defenseless. The orb still pulsed in his grip, its power thrumming through his veins. He turned to survey the chamber, looking for another way out. That's when he saw the second set of carvings, previously hidden behind the orb's pedestal. His blood ran cold as he realized what they depicted. The Malon's secret weapons facility, the bioweapon that threatened the very existence of humanity, and the orb's role in its creation. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to the facility's most guarded secrets. A scraping sound made Gabriel whirl around, orb raised to strike. Wezen was climbing through a gap in the rubble, plasma blade in hand. The Malon's face was a mask of hatred and determination. You cost me my soldiers, human, Wezen spat. I'm going to savor killing you. So you can try, Gabriel retorted, dropping into a combat stance. But we both know I'm the only one who can get us out of here alive. So how about a temporary truce until we reach the surface? Wezen's eyes flicked from Gabriel to the collapsed tunnel and back. Finally, with a growl of frustration, he lowered his weapon. Fine, a truce. But the moment we're out, I'm taking that orb and your head. Gabriel smiled coldly. You're welcome to try, but first we need to move. The longer we wait, the more time your people have to finish that bioweapon. He strode towards the far end of the chamber, where another passageway led deeper into the mountain. With every step, the orb pulsed in time with his heartbeat, filling him with a sense of purpose and power. He would find a way out of these caves. He would stop the Malon's bioweapon, and if he had to work with his worst enemy to do it, so be it. He was a human, after all. He'd do whatever it took to protect his species. Even if it meant descending into the very heart of darkness itself, with only a murderous alien warrior for company and a mysterious alien artifact as his guide. Gabriel and Wezen ventured deeper into the ancient tomb, the narrow passageways forcing them to work together to navigate the treacherous terrain. The once enemies now found themselves relying on each other for survival, their skills and knowledge complementing one another as they faced the trials left behind by the tomb's creators. The first challenge came in the form of a massive chamber filled with intricate puzzles and deadly traps. Gabriel's quick thinking and adaptability shone through as he deciphered the cryptic clues etched into the walls, his actions guiding them safely through the maze of hidden pitfalls and swinging blades. In the next room, they faced a horde of mechanical guardians, their ancient weapons still functioning after centuries of dormancy. Wezen's intimate understanding of Malon technology proved invaluable as he identified weak points in their armored chassis, allowing Gabriel to dispatch them with precision strikes. As they pressed on, the challenges grew more daunting, testing not only their physical prowess, but also their mental fortitude. In a room filled with mind-bending illusions, Gabriel's iron will and focus cut through the deception, while Wesen's knowledge of ancient Malan scripts helped them decipher the true path forward. Through their shared struggles and triumphs, a grudging respect began to form between the two warriors. Gabriel couldn't help but admire Wesen's fierce determination and loyalty, while Wesen found himself increasingly impressed by the human's resourcefulness and indomitable spirit. But their fragile alliance was put to the ultimate test when they finally reached the heart of the tomb. There, hovering above a central dais, was the artifact they had been seeking, a pulsing orb of energy that thrummed with an ancient, terrible power. As Gabriel approached the dais, Wesen's eyes widened in recognition. "That artifact," he breathed. "It's the key to the Forge of Ages, a weapon capable of destroying entire worlds." Gabriel turned to face Wesen, his grip tightening on his rifle. "What are you talking about?" "The Forge was the ultimate creation of my ancestors, a weapon so powerful that it was deemed too dangerous to use. They split the key into fragments and hid them away, but it seems your people have unwittingly led us to one of them." Wesen's gaze turned calculating, his hand drifting towards his plasma blade. With that kind of power, the Malan could end this war in a matter of days. No force in the galaxy could stand against us. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I can't let you do that, Wesen. That weapon could wipe out billions of innocent lives." "Innocent?" Wesen scoffed. "There are no innocents in war, Gabriel. Only those who are willing to do what must be done to achieve victory." The Malan lunged for the artifact, but Gabriel was faster. He tackled Wesen to the ground, the two of them grappling for control. They exchanged blows, each one fueled by the ideals and beliefs they held dear. Gabriel fighting for the lives he had sworn to protect, Wesen for the glory and supremacy of the Malan race. Their battle raged across the chamber, neither warrior giving an inch. But in the end it was Gabriel who emerged victorious, his hand closing around the artifact as he delivered a stunning blow to Wesen's temple. But his triumph was short-lived. The artifact, damaged in their struggle, began to pulse erratically, its energies lashing out and striking the walls of the tomb. The ancient structure shuddered, cracks spreading across the ceiling as chunks of stone began to rain down around them. Gabriel stared at the artifact in his hand, the weight of the terrible choice before him settling onto his shoulders. If he took the artifact, he could use its power to turn the tide of the war. But at what cost? How many lives would be lost in the process? In that moment he made his decision. With a roar of determination, Gabriel hurled the artifact to the ground, shattering it into 1,000 glittering shards. The tomb shook violently, the entire structure beginning to collapse in on itself. Gabriel hauled Wesen to his feet, the two of them racing for the exit as the world crumbled around them. They leaped through the entrance just as the tunnel caved in, sealing the tomb and its secrets away forever. As the dust settled, Gabriel and Wesen stood side by side, staring at the pile of rubble that had once been the entrance to the tomb. The artifact was gone, along with any chance of either side claiming its terrible power for themselves. "You know this changes everything," Wesen said quietly. "The war, the balance of power, nothing will be the same after this." Gabriel nodded, his eyes hard. "I know, but sometimes change is necessary, even if it means facing the consequences of our actions head-on." He turned to face Wesen, his hand outstretched. "What do you say, Commander? Are you ready to see where this new path takes us?" Wesen hesitated for a long moment, his gaze searching Gabriel's. Then slowly he reached out and clasped the human's hand in his own. "Lead the way, Gabriel Hicks, and may the stars have mercy on us both for what we've unleashed." "Certi." Gabriel and Wesen sprinted through the corridors of the rogue general's captured ship, the vessel shuddering under the impacts of the Malan defense fleet's relentless assault. Sparks flew from overloaded control panels, and the acrid stench of burning circuitry filled the air. "The bioweapon facility is on Vortax 5, one of the Malan's most heavily fortified moons," Wesen shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "We'll never break through their defenses in time." Gabriel's eyes flashed with determination. "We don't have a choice. If that weapon is activated, it's game over for humanity." They burst onto the bridge, Gabriel leaping into the pilot's seat as Wazon manned the weapons console. The view screen showed a roiling mass of Malon warships blockading the moon, their hulls bristling with cannon emplacements. Gabriel's hands flew over the controls, the ship responding to his touch like an extension of his body. He wrenched the vessel into a dizzying spiral, narrowly evading a barrage of plasma torpedoes. Wazon targeted the nearest warship, his fingers dancing across the firing controls. A salvo of quantum missiles streaked from their launch tubes, slamming into the enemy ship's shields in a blaze of light. "Their shields are holding," Wazon snarled in frustration. Gabriel gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Then his eyes fell on the captured ship's tactical readout, a crazy idea taking shape. "Wazon, I need you to overload the main reactor and eject the core on my mark." Understanding dawned in Wazon's eyes. He nodded sharply, his fingers already inputting the necessary commands. Gabriel gunned the engines, hurling their ship directly at the heart of the Malon fleet. Plasma fire raked across their shields, alarms shrieking in warning. Wazon slammed his fist down on the ejection control. The ship bucked violently as the reactor core blasted free from its housing, hurtling towards the Malon fleet like an improvised missile. Gabriel wrenched the ship into a steep dive, the G-forces crushing them into their seats. Behind them, the reactor core detonated in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave shattering the nearest Malon ships like glass. The remaining vessels scattered in disarray, their formation broken. Gabriel seized the opening, weaving through the debris field and angling for the moon's surface. But their triumph was short-lived. Warning klaxons blared as the ship's systems began to fail, the damage from the Malon assault finally taking its toll. Gabriel fought with the controls, but it was no use. The ship plummeted towards the moon's barren landscape. "Brace for impact!" Gabriel shouted seconds before they hit the ground in a bone-jarring crash. The ship skidded across the rocky terrain, metal screaming and tearing, before finally grinding to a shuddering halt. Gabriel and Wazon dragged themselves from the wreckage, battered but alive. In the distance, the squat, angular shape of the bioweapon facility loomed, its obsidian surface bristling with gun emplacements. "We're going to have to fight our way in," Gabriel said, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. Wazon hefted his own weapon, his eyes hard. "Then let's not waste any more time." They set off across the moon's surface, dust swirling around their boots with each step. It wasn't long before they encountered the first line of defense, a squad of Malon soldiers, their armor glinting in the harsh sunlight. Plasma fire erupted around them as they dove for cover behind a jagged outcropping of rock. Gabriel and Wazon returned fire, their weapons barking in unison. One by one the Malon soldiers fell, but more kept coming, pouring from hidden bunkers and firing positions. Gabriel and Wazon fought their way forward, leapfrogging from cover to cover, their movements fluid and coordinated, as if they'd been fighting together for years. As they neared the facility's entrance, a hail of blaster fire forced them to take shelter in a shallow crater. Gabriel peeked over the rim, his eyes widening at the sight of the reinforced blast doors and the phalanx of automated turrets guarding them. "We'll never get through that," he said, ducking back down as a plasma bolt sizzled overhead. Wazon's jaw clenched, his mind racing. Then his eyes fell on the fallen Malon soldiers, an idea forming. "I can get us in," he said, "but you're not going to like it." Minutes later, Gabriel and Wazon approached the blast doors, their armor painted with the colors and insignia of the Malon soldiers. The turrets tracked their movement, but held their fire, their friend or foe systems fooled by the disguise. They reached the doors, Wazon inputting a series of commands into the control panel. The massive doors ground open, revealing a cavernous hangar bay beyond. But as they stepped inside, a booming voice echoed through the chamber. "Did you really think your little trick would work on me?" Gabriel and Wazon whirled, finding themselves face to face with a towering figure in midnight black armor. his features twisted and augmented by gruesome surgical enhancements. The base commander, a product of the Malin's twisted genetic experiments. He lunged at them with frightening speed, his fist slamming into Gabriel's chest and sending him flying across the hangar. Weisen leaped to engage, his plasma blade flashing, but the commander's enhanced reflexes were too fast. A brutal backhand sent Weisen crashing into a stack of supply crates. Gabriel struggled to his feet, his ribs screaming in protest. He saw Weisen lying dazed among the shattered crates, the commander stalking towards him with murderous intent. Something snapped inside Gabriel, a cold rage filling his veins. He snatched up a fallen pulse rifle and charged, a wordless battle cry tearing from his throat. The commander turned just as Gabriel reached him, the rifle butt smashing into the side of his head. The Malon staggered, his enhanced skull fracturing from the blow. Gabriel pressed his advantage, raining down blows with relentless fury. The commander fought back, his strength incredible, but Gabriel's rage would not be denied. A final devastating strike sent the commander crashing to the deck, his body broken. Gabriel stood over him, chest heaving, the pulse rifle raised for the killing blow. But Weisen's hand on his arm stopped him. "We don't have time," he said, his voice rough with pain. "We have to stop the bioweapon." Gabriel hesitated, the rage still pulsing through him. Then, with a shuddering breath, he lowered the rifle and nodded. Together they raced deeper into the facility, alarms wailing around them as the base's security systems came alive. Auto-turrets emerged from hidden alcoves, filling the corridors with deadly green light. Gabriel and Weisen fought their way through, their weapons blazing, the stench of ozone and charred flesh choking the air. They reached the control room just as a squad of elite Malon warriors burst through the doors on the far side, plasma blades ignited. In the heart of the room, a massive cylindrical tank pulsed with sickly green light, the bioweapon primed and ready for deployment. A single console stood before it, the activation controls blinking with dire intent. Gabriel and Weisen charged forward, pulsefire and plasma bolts crisscrossing the room in a deadly web. They fought with desperate fury, the fate of humanity, the Malon and countless other species hanging in the balance. One by one the Malon warriors fell, cut down by Gabriel's precise shots and Weisen's flashing blade. But more kept coming, a seemingly endless tide of fanatical soldiers. Gabriel reached the console, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to abort the activation sequence. But the system was locked down, the countdown racing inexorably towards 0. Weisen appeared at his side, his armor scorched and dented. "Then we destroy it," he said grimly, raising his plasma blade. Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Together they turned to face the bioweapon, the countdown reaching its final seconds. 3, 2, 1. Their weapons struck as one, pulsefire and plasma blade piercing the tank's reinforced shell. The bioweapon ruptured in a geyser of green liquid, alarms shrieking in warning. Gabriel and Weisen were thrown back by the force of the blast, the room quaking around them. Secondary explosions ripped through the facility as the bioweapon's containment failed, the very foundations of the base shattering. Through the smoke and debris, Gabriel reached out, clasping Weisen's hand in his own. For a moment, human and Malon regarded each other, a deep understanding passing between them. Then the world dissolved into light and thunder, as the facility tore itself apart, the bioweapon and the insidious secrets of Vortex 5 vanishing in an apocalyptic conflagration that lit up the moon's barren surface like a second sun. Gabriel and Weisen stood before the bioweapon's control panel, the base commander's broken body lying at their feet. Alarms blared and warning lights flashed as they frantically worked the controls, trying to shut down the deadly device. "It's no use," Gabriel snarled, slamming his fist against the unyielding metal. "The system's locked down. We need an access code." Weisen leaned in, his eyes scanning the readouts. "The AI has initiated a failsafe protocol. Unless we input the correct code, the bioweapon will launch automatically." Gabriel checked his chronometer, his heart sinking. We've got less than an hour. We need to find that code fast. They exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. We'll have to split up, Weason said, his voice grim. Cover more ground. Gabriel nodded, already moving towards the door. I'll hit the archives, see if I can dig up anything in the base's files. You find those Malon scientists we captured, see if you can get them to talk. On it, Weason hefted his pulse rifle, his eyes hard. Watch your back out there. Gabriel flashed him a tight smile. You too. They burst out of the control room, racing down the corridors in opposite directions. Gabriel's mind whirled as he ran, mapping out the route to the base's data center. If there was any record of the code, it would be there. He reached the archives, blasting the lock with his rifle and kicking open the door. Inside, rows of data terminals stretched out before him, their screens glowing with cold light. Gabriel jacked into the nearest terminal, his fingers flying over the keys as he delved into the base's files. Encrypted directories and firewalls rose up to block his path, but he tore through them with ruthless efficiency, his hacking skills unmatched. Precious minutes ticked by as he dug deeper, searching for any scrap of information that might lead him to the code. Just as he was about to give up, a hidden file caught his eye, its encryption far more complex than the others. Gabriel tore into it with renewed determination, his brow beaded with sweat. The file's defenses fought him every step of the way, but finally he broke through. A single line of text scrolled across the screen. The key lies beneath the dragon's tail. Gabriel frowned, committing the cryptic message to memory. It was a clue, but to what? He needed more. He sprinted from the archives, pulse rifle at the ready. More gunfire sounded ahead, accompanied by the sizzle of plasma blasts and the meaty thunk of fists on flesh. Gabriel rounded a corner and skidded to a halt, taking in the scene before him. Weason stood in the center of a knot of Malon corpses, his armor dented and scorched. A trio of cowering Malon scientists huddled against the far wall, their hands raised in surrender. About time you showed up, Weason growled, wiping a trickle of purplish blood from his chin. I was starting to think I'd have all the fun myself. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Looks like you managed just fine. He jerked his chin towards the terrified scientists. They give you anything useful? Weason shook his head. Nothing yet, but I'll make them talk. He stalked towards the captives, his eyes glittering dangerously. The lead scientist, an elderly Malon with a shock of white hair, shrank back as Weason loomed over him. The code, Weason snarled, his voice low and menacing. Where is it? The scientist's mouth worked soundlessly, his eyes bulging with fear. Weason seized him by the front of his lab coat, hauling him up until they were nose to nose. Don't test me, old man, Weason hissed. You know what I'm capable of. Now talk. Weason dropped him, his face grim. He turned to Gabriel, a question in his eyes. Weason frowned, his gaze distant. Then his eyes widened. The dragon, of course. It's an old Malon legend, a guardian beast that protects the gates of the underworld. And in the stories, its lair is always depicted as a vault, Gabriel finished, his heart racing. At the base's core. Weason nodded, a fierce grin spreading across his face. Looks like we're headed into the belly of the beast. They set off at a run, navigating the twisting corridors with grim determination. The base's AI, sensing their intrusion, threw everything it had at them. Auto turrets emerged from hidden alcoves, filling the halls with deadly plasma fire. Squads of heavily armed Malon soldiers marched out to meet them, their eyes blank and soulless, controlled by the AI's overriding commands. Gabriel and Weason fought like men possessed, their weapons roaring, their bodies a blur of lethal motion. They cut down scores of enemies, dancing through the hail of plasma bolts with preternatural grace. But even their skill and fury couldn't overcome the sheer numbers arrayed against them. Step by step, the Malon forces pressed them back, driving them deeper into the bowels of the base. Just as all seemed lost, just as the enemy's ranks threatened to engulf them completely, Gabriel spotted a maintenance shaft off to one side, half hidden behind a tangle of piping. There, he shouted, pointing with his rifle. "We can use that to bypass their defenses." Weazen nodded, already moving. They dove into the shaft, the searing heat of plasma fire scorching the air behind them. The shaft was a tight, claustrophobic squeeze, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. The metal walls pressed in around them, the darkness broken only by the pale glow of emergency lighting strips. Gabriel took the lead, his enhanced senses guiding him through the maze of ducts and junctions. Weazen followed close behind, his breath rasping in the confines of his helmet. After what felt like an eternity of crawling, they emerged into a cavernous chamber, the heart of the base's reactor core. A massive spherical vault dominated the center of the room, its surface a seamless expanse of glittering alloy. Gabriel and Weazen approached warily, their weapons trained on the shadows. A single control panel stood before the vault, its screen glowing with baleful red light. Gabriel reached out to interface with the panel, but Weazen caught his arm. "Wait," the Malon growled. "Something's not right." A deep, grinding rumble filled the chamber, rising up from the depths of the base. The vault began to rotate, its surface splitting apart to reveal a tangled mass of machinery within. And at the heart of that machinery, pulsing with an inner fire, was an enormous biometric lock. Its scanner lens glowed with the same soulless red as the control panel, and Gabriel knew with a sudden sinking certainty that it was keyed to the base commander's genetic signature. "Damn it," he hissed, slamming his fist against the unyielding metal of the vault. "We'll never get inside without—" "Yes, we will," Weazen interrupted, his voice strangely calm. Gabriel turned to look at him, confusion writ large on his face. Weazen reached up and removed his helmet, his eyes meeting Gabriel's with a steady, unflinching gaze. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel hesitated for the barest fraction of a second, then slowly he nodded. Weazen closed his eyes, his brow furrowing with concentration, and before Gabriel's astonished gaze, the Malon's flesh began to ripple and change, his features flowing like molten wax. In the space of a heartbeat, Weazen's face had reshaped itself into a perfect replica of the base commander's, every line and contour identical down to the last detail. Gabriel watched, his jaw slack with amazement, as Weazen stepped up to the biometric lock and pressed his face against the scanner lens. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft chime of acceptance, the lock disengaged. The vault door swung open, revealing a small, dimly lit chamber beyond. Weazen staggered back from the lock, his features already beginning to revert to their original shape. He sagged against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his skin slick with sweat. Gabriel nodded, turning to the open vault. Inside, resting on a pedestal of polished obsidian, was a small data chip no larger than a thumbnail. Gabriel snatched up the chip, a fierce, exultant grin spreading across his face. They had done it. Against all odds, they had found the key to stopping the bioweapon. But even as the thought formed in his mind, a new sound echoed through the chamber, the tramp of booted feet, marching in perfect unison, the measured, relentless advance of the Malon's last line of defense. Gabriel whirled, pulse rifle snapping up to his shoulder. Beside him, Weazen pushed himself upright, his own weapon held at the ready. The Malon soldiers poured into the chamber, their faces blank and pitiless, their eyes glowing with the same red light as the AI's control systems. They leveled their weapons, a wall of plasma rifles aimed squarely at Gabriel and Weazen's hearts. For a single, frozen moment, the two sides stared at each other across the gulf of the chamber. Human and Malon, locked in a deadly stalemate, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Then, as if by some unspoken signal, they opened fire. The chamber erupted into a maelstrom of plasma bolts and searing light, the air vibrating with the deafening roar of massed weapons fire. Gabriel and Weazen dove for cover, the pedestal disintegrating behind them as a storm of plasma blasts reduced it to molten slag. Gabriel gritted his teeth, desperation lending strength to his aching muscles. They had to get out of here, had to get the code back to the control room before it was too late. He risked a glance over at Wezen, saw the Malon warrior pouring fire into the advancing ranks of his own people, his face a mask of grim determination. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. No words were needed. They knew what had to be done. Gaz 1, they burst from cover, charging headlong into the teeth of the enemy fire. Plasma bolts stitched the air around them, searing the flesh from their bones, but still they ran, their speed and fury carrying them through the Malon lines like a thunderbolt. They fought like demons, their weapons flashing, their bodies whirling in a deadly dance. Malon soldiers fell before them like wheat before the scythe, their blood painting the walls in gory splatters. And then they were through, racing down the corridors with the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Gabriel clutched the data chip tight in his fist, its edges biting into his palm, a talisman against the darkness that nipped at their heels. They reached the control room with seconds to spare, the bioweapon's final countdown flashing on the main display. Gabriel lunged for the control panel, jamming the data chip home with trembling fingers. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nothing happened. The countdown continued its inexorable march towards zero, the seconds ticking away like the heartbeats of a dying man. Then, with a soft chime, the countdown froze. The bioweapon systems whirred and clicked, the deadly machinery grinding to a halt as the code overrode its primary directives. Gabriel sagged back against the panel, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Beside him, Wezen let out a low, relieved chuckle, the sound startling in the sudden silence. They had done it. Against all odds, they had stopped the Malon's ultimate weapon, had averted the genocide of an entire galaxy. The cost had been high, the sacrifices almost too much to bear, but in the end, they had triumphed. Wezen snorted, shaking his head. "Speak for yourself, human. I'm just glad it's finally over." But even as he spoke the words, they both knew it was a lie. The war still raged beyond the confines of this base, the hatred and fear that had fueled it for so long, not so easily extinguished. There would be other battles, other sacrifices. The road ahead was long and fraught with peril, the future uncertain and dark. But for now, in this moment, they had each other, a human and a Malon bound together by the fires of war and the unbreakable ties of brotherhood. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. As the smoke cleared from the shattered ruins of the bioweapon facility, Gabriel and Wezen stood side by side, their armor scorched and battered, their faces grim with the weight of their victory. Around them, the remnants of their combined human and Malon forces secured the perimeter, tending to the wounded and rounding up the last of the loyalist holdouts. Gabriel turned to Wezen, his eyes searching the Malon's face. "We did it," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "We stopped the weapon." Wezen nodded, his expression unreadable. "But at what cost? The war still rages beyond this moon. Our people remain locked in a cycle of hatred and violence." Gabriel opened his mouth to reply, but was cut off by the sudden whine of incoming ships. He and Wezen spun, weapons raised, as a fleet of human and Malon vessels descended from the sky, their hulls glinting in the harsh light of the moon's surface. The ships touched down in a wide circle around the ruins of the facility, disgorging hundreds of heavily armed soldiers. But rather than opening fire, the troops held their positions, their weapons lowered. A lone figure emerged from the lead ship, a tall, imposing human in the uniform of a high-ranking general. He strode forward, flanked by a contingent of Malon officers, their faces taut with tension. "Gabriel Hicks," the general called out, his voice amplified by the speakers on his suit. "I am General Marcus Graves, commander of the 5th Human Expeditionary Force. We monitored your transmissions and came as soon as we could." Gabriel stepped forward, Wezen at his side. "General Graves," he said, inclining his head in a respectful nod, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Graves's gaze flicked to Wezen, then back to Gabriel. "I must admit I never thought I'd see the day when a human and a Malon would fight side by side. What you've done here, it's unprecedented." The commander and I have seen things, learned things, that have changed our perspectives, Gabriel said, choosing his words carefully. We believe there may be a path to peace between our peoples, but it will require difficult choices and uncomfortable truths. The Malon officers stirred, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. One of them, a grizzled veteran with a heavily scarred face, stepped forward. "You speak of peace, human," he snarled, "but your kind has done nothing but slaughter and subjugate us for generations. Why should we trust anything you say?" Weezon held up a hand, his voice calm but forceful. "Because, Commander Jan, I have seen firsthand the bravery and honor of this human. He risked his life to save not just his own people, but ours as well. If he believes there is a chance for peace, then I am willing to listen." Jan's eyes widened in surprise, as did those of the other Malon officers. For a moment a tense silence fell over the assembled soldiers. Then slowly Jan nodded. "Very well, Commander Weezon. I will hear what the human has to say, but I make no promises." Gabriel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you, Commander Jan. I propose that we convene a summit, a meeting of human and Malon leaders, to begin the process of negotiating an end to hostilities. It won't be easy, but I believe it is the only way forward." General Graves considered this for a long moment, his eyes searching Gabriel's face. Finally he nodded. "Agreed. I will contact Earth Command and begin making the necessary arrangements. In the meantime, I suggest we establish a joint security force to maintain order on this moon and prevent any further loyalist attacks." Gabriel and Weezon exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. "We're in," Gabriel said, speaking for both of them. "Let's get to work." As the human and Malon soldiers began to intermingle, setting up a perimeter and coordinating patrols, Gabriel pulled Weezon aside. "I meant what I said," he told the Malon commander, his voice low and intense. "I couldn't have done this without you. We're in this together now, for better or worse." Weezon clasped Gabriel's arm, his grip firm. "I know. And I will stand with you, Gabriel Hicks, no matter what comes. Our path will not be an easy one, but it is the right one." Together, the human and the Malon turned to face the uncertain future, united by their shared experiences and their newfound bond of friendship. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time in centuries, there was a glimmer of hope on the horizon, the hope of a galaxy at peace. Days turned into weeks as the negotiations progressed, human and Malon delegates meeting in hastily erected conference rooms and makeshift council chambers. Gabriel and Weezon found themselves at the center of the talks, their unique perspective and shared experiences making them invaluable mediators. But progress was slow, the wounds of centuries not so easily healed. Old grudges and deeply ingrained mistrust threatened to derail the discussions at every turn, and more than once Gabriel found himself wondering if peace was truly possible. It was during one such moment of doubt that the attack came. Gabriel was in the midst of a heated debate with a particularly stubborn Malon diplomat when the first explosions rocked the compound, sending delegates and guards alike diving for cover. Gabriel and Weezon were on their feet in an instant, weapons drawn as they raced towards the source of the blasts. They emerged onto a scene of chaos, loyalist soldiers pouring into the compound through a shattered wall, their weapons spitting fire. The human and Malon guards responded with deadly force, but they were outnumbered and outflanked. Gabriel and Weezon waded into the fray, their weapons barking, their movements fluid and deadly. They fought their way towards the center of the compound, where the delegates were being evacuated to a secure bunker. But as they neared the entrance, a voice crackled over their comms. General Graves, his tone urgent. "Gabriel, Weezon, we have a situation. The Loyalists have breached the bunker. They're after the delegates. You need to get in there now." Gabriel cursed under his breath, exchanging a grim look with Weezon. Together they plunged into the depths of the bunker, the sounds of screams and gunfire echoing through the halls. They burst into the main chamber, only to find themselves face to face with a squad of heavily armed Loyalists, their weapons trained on the cowering delegates. At their head stood a figure Gabriel recognized all too well, Commander Jan, his face twisted into a mask of hatred. "You!" Gabriel snarled, his grip tightening on his rifle. "I should have known you'd be behind this." Gabriel's eyes widened in horror as he realized what the device was. A detonator, linked to a series of bombs planted throughout the compound. If Jan activated it, the entire facility would go up in flames, taking the delegates and any hope of peace with it. Beside him, Vaesen tensed, his muscles coiling like a spring. Gabriel caught his eye, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to act, and fast. In a blur of motion, Vaesen lunged forward, his plasma blade flashing. He sliced through the nearest loyalists with ease, their bodies crumpling to the floor. Gabriel opened fire, his rifle barking as he mowed down the rest of the squad. But Jan was faster, his finger jabbing down on the detonator. The world around them shuddered as the bombs began to detonate, the walls cracking and buckling under the force of the blasts. Gabriel and Vaesen charged forward, hurtling over fallen debris and shattered bodies as they raced to reach the delegates. They herded them towards the exit, shielding them with their own bodies as the chamber collapsed around them. And then they were out, stumbling into the smoke-filled corridor as the bunker disintegrated behind them. Gabriel turned to Vaesen, his face grim. "The bombs," he said, his voice ragged with exertion. "We have to find them, disarm them before it's too late." Vaesen nodded, his eyes hard. "I'll take the east wing, you take the west. We'll coordinate over comms." They separated, each racing through the crumbling facility in search of the remaining explosives. Gabriel's heart pounded in his ears as he scanned the rubble, his eyes straining for any sign of the deadly devices. He found the first one in a shattered conference room, its timer ticking down with merciless precision. With trembling fingers he disarmed it, letting out a shaky breath as the countdown froze. One down, who knew how many to go? He moved on, his senses stretched to the limit, his body aching with fatigue. The seconds ticked by, each one an eternity, as he searched for the remaining bombs. Over the comms, Vaesen's voice crackled with static. "I've got 2 more in the east wing, moving to disarm now." Gabriel acknowledged, his own tally rising as he located and neutralized bomb after bomb. But even as they worked, the Loyalist forces continued their assault, the sounds of battle raging all around them. And then, just as Gabriel was beginning to hope they might actually succeed, Jean's voice sounded over the comms, his tone mocking. "You may have stopped some of my bombs, but you'll never find them all in time. This facility is still going to burn, and with it any chance of peace between our peoples." Gabriel's blood ran cold as he realized the implications of Jean's words. The Loyalist commander was right. Even if they managed to disarm most of the bombs, it would only take one to bring the whole compound down on their heads. He keyed his comm, his voice urgent. "Vaesen, we need to get everyone out of here now. We can't risk any more lives on this." There was a moment of silence, then Vaesen's voice tight with emotion. "Understood. I'll start evacuating the delegates. You keep searching for those bombs." Gabriel nodded, even though he knew Vaesen couldn't see him. He pushed himself harder, his muscles screaming with every step, his lungs burning with every breath. And then, just as he was about to give up hope, he saw it, the final bomb, nestled in a tangle of broken pipes and sparking wires. He dropped to his knees beside it, his fingers flying over the detonator, searching for the disarm sequence. But even as he worked, he heard the pounding of footsteps behind him, the harsh rasp of labored breathing. He turned, his eyes widening as he saw Jan standing over him, the Loyalist commander's face twisted into a snarl of rage. "You!" Jan spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You've ruined everything, but I won't let you stop me, not now, not when I'm so close." He lunged forward, his fists hammering into Gabriel's face, his body slamming into the humans with bone-crushing force. Gabriel fought back, his own blows fueled by desperation and adrenaline. They rolled across the floor, grappling and punching, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The bomb lay forgotten beside them, its timer ticking down with relentless precision. Gabriel felt his strength beginning to fade. his vision blurring as Jan's blows rained down upon him. He knew he couldn't win this fight, not alone, not against a foe as skilled and ruthless as the Loyalist commander. But even as that realization settled over him, he heard a shout from behind him, a voice he recognized all too well. Wei Zhen, his plasma blade ignited, his face a mask of determination. The Malon commander charged forward, his blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. Jan spun to face him, his own weapon leaping into his hand, and the two warriors clashed in a blaze of sparks and fury. Gabriel struggled to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He staggered towards the bomb, his fingers fumbling with the disarm sequence. The timer was down to seconds now, each one ticking away with merciless finality. Behind him, he heard the clash of blades, the grunts of exertion and pain as Wei Zhen and Jan fought on. He forced himself to concentrate, to block out the sounds of battle and focus on the task at hand. And then, with a final desperate effort, he input the last command and the timer froze. The bomb's detonation sequence aborted. Gabriel sagged back against the wall, his chest heaving with relief. But his respite was short-lived. A cry of pain sounded from behind him, and he turned to see Wei Zhen staggering back, a deep gash scored across his chest. Jan pressed his advantage, his blade flashing as he drove the Malon commander back. Gabriel leaped to his feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through his body. He charged forward, a wordless battle cry tearing from his throat as he slammed into Jan with all the force he could muster. The Loyalist commander stumbled, his balance faltering, and in that moment Wei Zhen struck, his blade plunging deep into Jan's chest. The Malon's eyes widened in shock, his mouth opening in a silent scream as he toppled backwards, his life's blood pooling around him. Gabriel and Wei Zhen stood over the fallen commander, their chests heaving, their faces grim. Around them, the sounds of battle began to fade as the last of the Loyalist forces were subdued, the compound falling silent save for the crackle of flames and the groans of the wounded. Wei Zhen nodded, his own face etched with weariness. It's over. The delegates are safe. The bombs are disarmed. We've won. But even as he spoke the words, Gabriel could see the shadow of doubt in his eyes, the knowledge that their victory had come at a terrible cost. The compound lay in ruins around them, the bodies of the fallen littering the ground. And yet, even in the midst of that devastation, there was a glimmer of hope. The delegates had survived. The peace process could continue. The dream of a galaxy united, of a future free from the cycle of hatred and violence, still lived. Gabriel reached out, clasping Wei Zhen's arm in a gesture of solidarity. "We did it," he said, his voice low and intense. "We showed them that humans and Malon can work together, can fight side by side for a common cause. That's a powerful thing, Wei Zhen. It's a start." The Malon commander nodded, his grip tightening on Gabriel's arm. "A start," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "But there is still much work to be done. The road ahead will be long and hard, and there will be many who seek to tear down what we have built here." Gabriel's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with resolve. "Then we'll just have to keep fighting," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "Together, until the job is done, and the galaxy is finally at peace." And with those words, the human and the Malon turned to face the future, united by their shared sacrifice and their unwavering determination to forge a better tomorrow, no matter the cost. As the smoke cleared from the ruins of the shattered compound, Gabriel and Wei Zhen stood side by side, their armor battered and scorched, their faces grim with the weight of their victory. Around them, human and Malon soldiers worked to tend to the wounded and secure the area, a fragile truce holding in the aftermath of the Loyalist attack. Gabriel turned to Wei Zhen, clasping the Malon's arm in a gesture of solidarity. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "We stopped the weapon and exposed the truth, but our work is just beginning." Wei Zhen nodded, his eyes hard. The Loyalists were not acting alone. There is a rot within the Malon government, a cancer that has been feeding this war for far too long. As if to punctuate his words, a commotion broke out near the compound's entrance. A group of Malon soldiers, their armor emblazoned with the insignia of the ruling council, pushed their way through the crowd, their faces twisted with anger. "Traitors!" one of them shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Gabriel and Wezen. "You have betrayed the Malon people, sided with the enemy. You will face justice for your crimes." Gabriel stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. "The only traitors here are those who have lied to their people, who have sacrificed countless lives for their own greed and ambition." The soldiers hesitated, their resolve faltering in the face of Gabriel's unwavering gaze. Wezen seized the moment, his voice ringing out across the compound. "Brothers, sisters, listen to me. We have been deceived, manipulated by those we trusted to lead us. The war, the bioweapon, all of it was a lie, a ploy by corrupt officials to maintain their grip on power." He gestured to Gabriel, his expression fierce. "This human, our supposed enemy, has fought and bled alongside me to uncover the truth. He is no traitor, but a hero, a champion of peace and justice." Murmurs of unease rippled through the gathered soldiers, their loyalties torn. Gabriel pressed the advantage, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wezen. "We have a chance now, a chance to end this war and build a better future for both our peoples. But first we must root out the corruption that has poisoned our governments and our hearts." He turned to Wezen, a question in his eyes. The Malon commander nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We will not rest until the guilty are brought to justice and the truth is known by all. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, we will see this through to the end." As the soldiers dispersed, their minds reeling with the revelations, Gabriel and Wezen set to work. They gathered a small, trusted team of human and Malon operatives, each one hand-picked for their skills and their loyalty to the cause of peace. Together, they began the painstaking process of infiltrating the Malon government, slicing through layers of secrecy and deceit to uncover the true extent of the conspiracy. They hacked secure databases, intercepted encrypted communications, and pieced together a damning web of evidence that implicated some of the highest-ranking officials in the Malon hierarchy. But their mission was fraught with peril. The conspirators, sensing the noose tightening around their necks, lashed out with increasing desperation. Gabriel and Wezen found themselves the targets of assassination attempts, their safe houses raided, their allies threatened and coerced. Through it all they persevered, driven by a shared sense of purpose and an unbreakable bond of trust. They fought side by side, their skills and strengths complementing each other perfectly. Where Gabriel's quick wit and adaptability shone through, Wezen's unwavering resolve and insider knowledge proved invaluable. As they closed in on the heart of the conspiracy, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The evidence led them to a shadowy figure within the Malon ruling council, a master manipulator who had orchestrated the war and the bioweapon project for their own twisted ends. Gabriel and Wezen knew they had to act fast. They devised a daring plan to confront the conspirator and their allies before the council, to lay bare the truth and demand justice for the countless lives lost to their machinations. But even as they made their final preparations, a shocking revelation threatened to shatter their alliance. As Gabriel pored over the last of the intercepted communications, a name caught his eye, a name he knew all too well. He turned to Wezen, his face ashen. "Wezen, I don't know how to say this, but your brother, he's involved. He's one of the conspirators." Wezen reeled as if struck, his eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment he seemed to waver, torn between loyalty to his family and his newfound principles. But as he met Gabriel's gaze, he saw the truth reflected there, the unshakable certainty of their shared purpose, and in that moment he knew what he had to do. "Then he will face justice like all the rest," Wezen said, his voice heavy with grief and determination. "I will not let my personal feelings stand in the way of what must be done." Together they strode into the council chamber, their heads held high, their evidence clutched tight in their hands. They faced the assembled leaders of the Malon government, the conspirators arrayed before them like a wall of lies and deceit. And then, With a voice that rang with the clarity of truth, they began to speak, to lay out the depths of the conspiracy and the toll it had taken on both their peoples. They spoke of the lives lost, the families shattered, the futures stolen by the greed and ambition of a few. As they presented their evidence, the chamber erupted into chaos, the conspirators scrambling to defend themselves, to deflect and deny. But Gabriel and Wezen would not be silenced, their words cutting through the din like a blade through flesh. And then, in a moment of stunned silence, Wezen's brother rose to his feet, his face twisted with rage and desperation. He leveled a trembling finger at Gabriel, his voice dripping with venom. "Lies!" he spat, spittle flying from his lips. "This human has poisoned my brother's mind, turned him against his own people. He is the real enemy here, not us." In the end, the evidence was irrefutable, the guilt of the conspirators laid bare for all to see. The council had no choice but to act, to strip the traitors of their power and privilege and consign them to the justice they so richly deserved. And as the dust settled and the new order took shape, Gabriel and Wezen found themselves at the center of it all, hailed as heroes and visionaries, the architects of a new era of peace and cooperation between their peoples. They took their place as joint ambassadors, tasked with guiding the fragile new alliance forward, with healing the wounds of the past and building a brighter future for all. But even as they set to work, they knew their greatest challenge still lay ahead. For the scars of the war ran deep, the mistrust and prejudice on both sides not so easily wiped away. They would have to be patient, to lead by example and show their people that a new way was possible, that the old hatreds and fears could be overcome. It would not be easy, Gabriel knew. There would be setbacks and challenges, moments of doubt and despair. But as he looked to Wezen, to the unwavering strength and determination in his eyes, he knew they would face them together, as brothers in arms and in peace. For they had come too far, sacrificed too much to let this chance slip away. They would build their new world, brick by brick and bond by bond, until the very stars themselves shone with the light of their shared destiny. And woe betide any who sought to stand in their way, any who clung to the old ways of war and division. For Gabriel and Wezen would be waiting for them, ready to fight for the future they had bled to create, to the very last breath and the very last beat of their hearts. The war may have ended, but their true battle was just beginning. And together they would see it through to the end, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. For the sake of their peoples, for the sake of the galaxy itself, they would not fail. They could not fail. The weight of too many lives, too many dreams rested upon their shoulders, but they would bear that weight, carry that burden, until the very end. For they were more than just soldiers now, more than just warriors on opposite sides of a battlefield. They were brothers, bound by the unbreakable ties of shared purpose and unshakable trust. And together they would change the face of the galaxy itself, one heart and one mind at a time, until the very stars themselves sang with the joy of their triumph. Months turned into years as Gabriel and Wezen worked tirelessly to forge a lasting peace between their peoples. They traveled the galaxy, negotiating treaties, mediating disputes, and healing the scars of a centuries-long conflict. Slowly but surely, the walls of hatred and mistrust began to crumble, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of unity. But even as the bonds between humans and Malon strengthened, a new threat was gathering in the shadows. Whispers began to reach Gabriel and Wezen of a secret cabal, a hidden network of extremists from both sides who sought to tear down all they had built. They called themselves the Architects of Chaos, and their leader was a figure shrouded in mystery, known only as the Architect. Through coded transmissions and covert meetings, they plotted to reignite the flames of war, to plunge the galaxy back into the darkness of conflict and hatred. Gabriel and Wezen knew they had to act fast. They gathered a team of their most trusted operatives, human and Malon alike, and set out to uncover the Cabal's plans. They followed a trail of whispers and shadows, piecing together a terrifying picture of the Architect's true goals. The Cabal was planning a series of coordinated attacks, strikes against key human and Malon targets designed to shatter the fragile peace and reignite old hostilities. If they succeeded, all the progress Gabriel and Wezen had made would be undone in a matter of days. The two friends knew they had to stop the architects at any cost. They raced against time, their team working around the clock to identify the Cabal's agents and disrupt their plans. They foiled bombing plots, intercepted assassins, and unraveled a web of conspiracies that stretched across the galaxy. But even as they struck blow after blow against the Cabal, Gabriel and Wezen knew they were running out of time. The architects always seemed to be one step ahead, their plans adapting and evolving with each setback. Finally, after months of desperate struggle, they caught a break. A captured extremist revealed the location of the architect's main base, a remote and heavily fortified compound on a war-torn planet deep in the outer rim. Gabriel and Wezen gathered their forces and launched an all-out assault, human and Malon soldiers fighting side by side as they battled their way through the Cabal's defenses. The fighting was brutal and bloody, with heavy losses on both sides. As they neared the heart of the compound, Gabriel and Wezen found themselves face to face with the architect himself, surrounded by his inner circle of fanatical followers. The battle that followed was the stuff of legends, a whirlwind of plasma fire and flashing blades, of desperate courage and bitter sacrifice. In the end, Gabriel and Wezen stood victorious, but at a terrible cost. Many of their closest friends and comrades had fallen, and Wezen himself bore a grievous wound, his lifeblood staining the ground at his feet. But even as they caught their breath, the architect rose from the rubble, his face twisted into a snarl of hatred. He tore away his mask, revealing a face that Wezen knew all too well. It was his brother Zoran, long believed dead in a human attack years before. But here he stood, his eyes blazing with a madness born of grief and revenge. "You took everything from me," Zoran spat, his voice dripping with venom. "My family, my future, my very reason for living. And for what? To make peace with the very creatures who destroyed us?" Wezen staggered, his mind reeling with shock and horror. He had mourned his brother, had carried the weight of his loss for so long. To see him now, twisted by hatred and spite, was almost more than he could bear. Wezen nodded, tears streaming down his face. Together he and Gabriel advanced on Zoran, their weapons at the ready. The final battle was a clash of wills as much as weapons, a struggle not just for victory, but for the very soul of their peoples. In the end, it was Wezen who struck the final blow, his plasma blade piercing his brother's heart. Zoran fell, his eyes wide with shock and something like relief. And then he was gone, his body still and cold on the blood-stained ground. Wezen fell to his knees, a howl of anguish tearing from his throat. Gabriel knelt beside him, his own eyes wet with tears. Around them the compound burned, the last embers of the architect's hatred fading to ash and dust. The Cabal was broken, its leaders dead or captured, its plots unraveled and undone. But even as the galaxy celebrated the victory, Gabriel and Wezen knew that the true struggle was just beginning. The scars left by the conflict would take generations to heal, and there would always be those who sought to reopen old wounds for their own gain. But they also knew that they would face those challenges together, side by side, human and Malon united in purpose and resolve. They had forged their bond in the crucible of war, had tempered it in the fires of sacrifice and loss. And now, as they looked out over the stars, they knew that bond would be their greatest strength in the battles yet to come. For in the end, it was not the might of their weapons or the strength of their armies that would determine the future, but the power of their friendship and the unwavering commitment they shared to the cause of peace. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.